maybe there wasn't a lot of interest in probing sudden infant deaths in general. That's my feeling. That's my personal opinion. And if that's the case, I think we should all be concerned about this.
Robert Krajcik reporting for Rebel News here in Ottawa, Ontario, on day 9 of the disciplinary tribunal of Constable Helen Grus. She's an Ottawa Police Service officer. She works in the Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit, SACA, and she's being accused of discreditable conduct. And if she's found guilty of this allegation, she could be either demoted or terminated. Now, what did she do that led to the OPS accusing her of this misconduct? Well, she was inquiring about a possible linkage between the vaccine status of mothers and infant deaths. In other words, whether or not there was any relationship between these so-called COVID-19 vaccines received by mothers with young children and deaths of their infants. I want to remind you folks out there in our dear audience that we can't do this in the field reporting for free. We need your financial support to continue doing these operations, this important journalism. So please visit rebelfieldreports.com, help us out, and stay up to date with our ongoing reporting. So the day's proceedings were largely dedicated to dealing with ongoing objections from the prosecution against the introduction of certain documents as evidence from the defense. The first example I'll share with you folks is an email chain between Helen Grus and her top supervisor at the time in the SACA unit, Staff Sergeant Shelley Rossetti, who testified as a witness today. So this email chain that the defense has in its possession was not permitted to be entered into the tribunal as evidence, as Chris Renwick, who is the tribunal officer, the de facto judge over this hearing, agreed with the prosecution. The prosecution's justification for this objection was that somehow it is violative of public privilege, which supposedly means that the public interest would be undermined if information in this email chain was revealed to the public, presumably confidential information or the Ottawa Police Service's methods of operation, somehow investigatory operations would be compromised.
Well, first of all, this quote was nothing more than what's been happening all along in this trial. And this is what Trials Officer Chris Renwick said here at the Detective Grus trial. This hearing cannot and will not be a venue for opinions and theories linking vaccines to child deaths. Robert, that's what this trial is all about. But they're doing everything they can to shut down any evidence that would give a reason why Detective Grus did what she did. She obeyed her oath, she obeyed her instincts, and her professionalism was outstanding. And she wondered whether or not there was anything to do, any relation, any possible relation between vaccinated mothers and the sudden, unexpected deaths of breastfeeding babies. And for that, they've charged her, they shut down her investigation, and this statement by the trials officer, effectively the judge here today, it's a tribunal, was in effect a huge support for Big Pharma. The rules that are happening here are nothing to do with courts as we know them. And unfortunately, and we've heard it said time and time again during this hearing and back in August, the trials officer, the judge, is not a judge. He has no legal training, but the rules that he makes up, that he determines, have real legal strength, and he can basically do what he wants, and we're seeing that.
Another objection from the prosecution that was largely upheld by Chris Renwick, again the tribunal officer, de facto judge in this hearing, was the introduction of a duty book a police workbook as evidence in this hearing. Specifically, Shelley Rossetti's notebook, which she brought with her as a witness. She had it in her possession in the witness stand. The defense wanted to cross-examine Rossetti on the basis of that notebook. And again, the prosecution opposed to that, saying that the public disclosure of this notebook would somehow be violative of, again, public privilege. And Renwick, who is, by the way, not a lawyer by training, but a tenured, decades-long retired auto police service officer, he agreed with the prosecution and basically denied almost any entry of that notebook into the hearing as evidence. So I spoke with Jason Unruh. He is writing with True North. He was in the proceedings all day, and he made some remarks about this sort of gossipy, rumor-filled environment within the SACA unit in which Helen Grus worked. And this assessment comes from the testimonies of SACA officers who were invited as witnesses to testify for the prosecution. And I'll share some of the words they used that illustrates this point. They use terms in their testimony, such as anti-vaccine and anti-vaxxer, to describe Helen Grus. We know these are nonsense, derogatory terms used by people who are fully on board and aligned with what I call the COVID-19 enterprise. We also heard testimony from police officers stating that they had heard, although none of them could confirm that they heard it firsthand from Grus, that Grus believed there were nanobots and tracking devices inside these so-called COVID-19 vaccines. I also heard the term in the first week of this tribunal, conspiracy, used as shorthand for conspiracy theorist in reference to Helen Grus. So the reason I'm sharing these testimonies with you and Jason's assessment of these testimonies is that it illustrates an environment in the SACA unit of antipathy or suspicion towards Helen Grus. A couple other examples I'll share with you. There was also an unconfirmed rumor that she had violated some sort of lockdown or capacity limit at some hockey rink that she had rented out for her children and others to play at. And also, when she didn't show up to work after this so-called vaccine mandate was imposed across the OPS and its subunits, there were these inferences made that she didn't take the so-called COVID-19 vaccine, and therefore they made assessments about her based on that. So again, this just illustrates a sort of culture and attitude of suspicion towards Grus and gives you an insight into at least how some of the people who work at the OPS think about this entire COVID-19 enterprise.
Well, what we've seen from the start, and I'll include August hearings as well, which took place August 14th to 18th, the series of prosecution witnesses that the police brought forward in their prosecution against Helen Grus basically indicated that Detective Grus was very much alone in her views about vaccine safety, also the efficacy of other pandemic restrictions, the masking, the testing, and so on and so forth. So it was created an atmosphere, well, I believe it created an atmosphere of isolation for her, and this happened physically too, as she was shipped off from working at the downtown police station to working at Huntmar Road here. The fear was that because she was unvaccinated, she presented a risk to her colleagues, members of the public that are interacting with her colleagues for various reasons, investigations and so forth. So she was isolated. She was alone in her views about COVID, and so this, I think, was the catalyst for, I would describe them as gossip, rumors about her, which we heard today, that she booked a hockey rink for her children to use in Kemptville, and the rumor going around the office was that she was going to lie about the vaccination status of her children, when in fact at that point in time, when she rented the rink, there was no vaccination mandate for children under 18, so it was just completely made up.
The defense's desire to introduce expert witnesses, presumably physicians or scientists or virologists, to testify, and what would Chris Renwick's decision over that, because he's going to decide whether or not they're permitted, look like, given the fact that he's already said previously on Monday, I recall, that this hearing, this tribunal, will not be a venue, that's a quote, for theories, another quote, regarding injuries or harms associated with the so-called COVID-19 vaccines. So what's up with this pending witness application?
Well, this is another theme that's emerged time and again in this case, where there's an inconsistency. So, like you said the other day, Chris Renwick states that this court will not, or this tribunal will not be a venue for opinions or theories about the safety concerns, dangerous effects of the COVID vaccine. Well, tomorrow the defense is going to make submissions for expert witnesses to presumably talk about just that. And so this goes back to Sergeant Rossetti today testifying that, she respected Detective Grus, she considered her a friend, and that the door was always open for Detective Grus to come in and talk about any question or any concern she had, personal or work-related, except for COVID. Because there was an email today, and it's been discussed previously, but it was brought into evidence today, that Sergeant Rossetti wrote Detective Grus an email and instructed her not to talk about COVID in the office. So which is it? This is where we're left at. It's just been a strange pattern through this entire tribunal about what is acceptable discourse. What was acceptable discourse in the office, and then in the tribunal, what's acceptable evidence? And it's just objection after objection for what I think are or is evidence that is germane to this case, right? Notes between officers who are involved in Sergeant Arbitot's professional standards unit investigation, right? The defense is still trying to get some of these notes, electronic communications, still trying to see those, still trying to see the second duty book, right? That could contain exculpatory evidence. Right. So, it seems there, and Vanessa Stewart, the prosecutor, said this today, that this is a regulatory issue, right? All these other matters are for if Detective Grus has a grievance about how she was treated, then that's another venue, and then
labor relations.
Yeah, labor relations. I mean, if Detective Grus believed that there was a criminal negligence with respect to sudden infant deaths in connection to the vaccine, that's a homicide issue. Right. So it leaves me wondering, what is the SACA unit detective's responsibility in investigating sudden infant deaths? And if we're going by testimony we've heard this week, then it's just sort of like looking over the coroner's shoulder and making sure that all the answers on the questionnaire are filled out. And if that's the case, then it's case closed, right? As Detective Tara Anderson testified, most sudden infant deaths are ruled unascertained. So just as one guy watching all of this, I've seen every single day of the hearings, it leaves me to believe that, maybe there wasn't a lot of interest in probing sudden infant deaths in general. That's my feeling. That's my personal opinion. And if that's the case, I think we should all be concerned about this.
Dear Rebel News audience, if you value and appreciate our in-the-field reports, please remember that we benefit from your financial support so that we can continue delivering this journalism to you. So please visit rebelfieldreports.com, help us out, and stay up to date with our ongoing reporting.